Afternoon. National Assembly of Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon is questions to the First Minister. And question 1, Rebecca Evans.
Will the First Minister make a statement on services for people with mental ill health?
Yes, I'd refer the member to the Minister for Health and Social Services speech in the plenary debate on mental health last week.
Thank you, First Minister. Haval's latest campaign reminds us that people with a serious mental illness have a life expectancy which is around 17 years lower than for people without, and that's usually down to preventable physical health problems. How is the Welsh Government ensuring that people get the right support from their health professionals and that care plans properly address the physical implications of mental ill health?
Well, I can say that we wholeheartedly support the Let's Get Physical campaign, which the Minister actually launched last month. And of course particularly the way in which it's empowering individuals to take control of their own physical health as well as their own mental health. There is much evidence that regular physical exercise can improve mental well-being in the wider population, and in addition we also support healthy lifestyles through a range of programmes including Let's Walk Cymru and the National Exercise Referral Scheme.
Darren Miller.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, very pleased to hear that you support Haval's campaign. Your government has made a very clear commitment to ring-fence National Health Service expenditure on mental ill health. So I was very disappointed to read in the latest statistical release that spending from 2011-12 to 2013 on mental health has actually fallen from £641.8 million to £617.5 million pounds. And decreased also in percentage terms against the NHS budget from 11.9% in 2011-12 to 11.4% in 2012-13. Given that you've made this very clear commitment as a government, and it's a commitment on which we agree, why on earth aren't you fulfilling it?
Well, we have, of course, put in further investments such as the extra money into dementia services, the money into CARMS, the money to run our veterans' mental health and well-being service as well, and of course the capital money that's gone into the residential units in Bridgend and indeed in Abergele, as well as the new facilities for elderly mental health services at Wrexham, Milo, Llandoch and Glanreed Hospital. So indeed there's been extra spending on mental health that may not be included in the figures the member has quoted.
Elena Parrott.
Diolch Llywydd. First Minister, notwithstanding the commitments in Together for Mental Health, a number of constituents have raised with me concerns about the transition between child and adolescent mental health services and adult mental health services. What more can the Welsh Government be doing to make sure that that transition is managed appropriately so those very vulnerable young people receive the appropriate level of support throughout their healthcare pathway?
Yes, I mean, that transition is important, as we know. I know officials have already met with key stakeholders, including LHBs, CARMS and adult services, to look at this issue as well as other issues, because, of course, it is crucial to the management of the individual's condition that the step from CARMS to adult mental services is as smooth as possible. And one way of ensuring that that is smooth is to make sure that there isn't inappropriate placement of young people on adult wards.
Question 2, Clea Griffiths.
Diolch Llywydd. A wnaeth Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am strategaeth Cymru ar y newid yn yr hinsawdd?
Diolch. Llywydd, dwi'n deall bod chi wedi caniatáu bod cwestiynau 2, 3 a 10 yn cael ei grwpio. Okay. Wel, ni wedi datgan wrth gwrs yn ein hadroddiad blynyddol bod ni moyn cymryd camau cadarnhaol o ran gweithredu'r strategaeth, ond rydym yn cydnabod bod angen gwneud mwy i sicrhau yn bod ni'n cyflawni'r targedau. Bydd y gweinidog cyfoeth naturiol a bwyd yn gwneud datganiad ar adnewyddu'r strategaeth ar yr 8fed o fis nesaf.
Diolch i chi am yr ateb. Bydden ni'n dadle bod angen mwy na refresh ar y strategaeth fy hunan, oherwydd mae'r ystadegau ryddhawyd wrthos diwetha yn dangos bod Llywodraeth Cymru wedi methu targedau ar allyriadau o safbwynt y sector gyhoeddus, wedi methu ar drafnidiaeth, wedi methu ar dau preswyl, wedi methu ar amaeth ac wedi methu ar ddefnydd tir. Nid yn unig bod yr allyriadau sydd fod i gwmpo yn mynd i lawr, ond a gweud y gwir, mae rhai ohonyn nhw yn mynd i fyny. Nawr, Cymru yw'r unig ran o'r Deyrnas Unedig lle does dim targedau statudol ar newid yn yr hinsawdd. Mae Pwyllgor y Deyrnas Unedig ar newid yn yr hinsawdd wedi deud y dyle fod. Mae Comisiwn Cymru ar newid yn yr hinsawdd wedi deud y dyle fod. Oeddech chi'n teimlo bod hi'n amser i wneud hynny?
Gyda'r pwerau, mae'n gofio wrth gwrs bod Lloegr hefyd wedi gweld cynyddiad yn y nifer o nwy carbon hefyd. Ond, wrth gwrs, dyw'r tools ddim gyda ni fel y maen nhw gyda Lloegr, yr Alban a Gogledd Iwerddon. Ac wrth gwrs, fel mae'r aelod yn gwybod, ni'n gryf o blaid gweld yr un pwerau fan hyn a beth sy'n ar gael yng Ngweddill y Dain Unedig mwyn delio gyda'r mater hyn.
David Rees.
First Minister, on a more positive side, one of the major factors in climate change actually is energy generation. And yesterday, the Minister for Economy, Transport and Science actually opened the specific plant, which I know you're aware of, in my constituency, which is providing that new innovative approaches to actually looking at green energy. Therefore, can you actually ask what concept the Welsh Government is taking on, the concept of buildings as power plants, which is what that is, to ensure that we can move forward with a far greener approach to energy generation in Wales?
We do recognise that. By the end of 2012, we had over 30,000 solar PV projects with a total installed capacity of 121 megawatts. The vast majority of those projects are roof-mounted on domestic and commercial property. That's the equivalent to the electricity consumption of over 22,500 homes in Wales, with an annual saving of 41,000 tonnes of CO2. As the member will know, of course, that the opening of the blast furnace in Port Talbot at the steelworks will have had an effect on carbon emissions, but nevertheless has had a beneficial effect on the maintenance and long-term security of that plant.
Would the First Minister agree that encouraging fair trade in Wales is one of the ways to tackle climate change, as it helps to enable producers in developing countries to grow and develop their products in a sustainable way? And I'd draw his attention to the fair trade for bananas that has been campaigned on in Wales. And would he agree that we really need to look on climate change in a holistic international way?
Absolutely, and I've seen this with my own eyes when I was in Uganda, where much reliance had been placed on the planting of eucalyptus trees because they grow quickly and they can provide firewood, but are shallow-rooted and are bad for the environment in the sense they don't bind the soil together, and they have increased the risk of landslides. As part of the work that we have done, particularly working through with projects such as the Size of Wales, we've been able to provide trees that will bind the soil together as well as provide shade for coffee growers so they can carry on growing the cash crops that they need. So there's no doubt at all that through working with fair trade producers such as Gumatindo in Uganda, and through supporting schemes that make the environment more sustainable through planting the right trees, we can actually reach the aims that we all want to see.
Russell George.
There are concerns that politicians of all political persuasions are not making the impact of climate change tangible to the Welsh public on the doorstep, so they can understand those challenges, not just to our environment, but across sectors. What is the Welsh Government doing to translate these changes to the various sectors so they do become real and relevant to the Welsh public?
Well, of course, we are energy exporters. The more energy that we generate given the existing plant, the more carbon emissions we will also generate. That's why, of course, there's a need to have wind power on and offshore. I know this is controversial for the member in his constituency, but nevertheless, if we are serious about reducing carbon emissions, we have to take renewable energy seriously, whether that's on offshore, whether it's wind, tidal, or indeed any form of marine energy.
William Powell.
First Minister, a key component to any climate change mitigation strategy is surely how we source our fuel and generate our electricity, as you've just referenced. In that context, yesterday's Welsh Affairs Select Committee report into unconventional gas has recommended that there should be Welsh-specific guidance on fracking, and this endorses the position of my party and indeed the Labour-led WLGA. Will you, First Minister, work with your colleague, the Natural Resources Minister, to consider again whether or not there should be a Welsh-specific TAN on fracking?
Well, these are all things we will keep under consideration. Where new technologies emerge, it's important that there is proper guidance in place in order to ensure that they can be used effectively and safely. But nevertheless, where there are emerging challenges that are identified with regard to technologies such as fracking, we will of course look to see how guidance can be updated in order to deal with that new technology.
Antoinette Sandbach.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, in your answer to the question from Claire Hughes-Griffith, you claimed that you didn't have the powers to be able to deal with climate change, but in fact the areas listed by him included housing, which is devolved, transport, which is largely devolved, agriculture, where you have devolved powers, And it seems to me that you do have substantial powers which do allow you to tackle climate change, given the concern that is being expressed about the inability to meet the 2020 target. What are you doing to look at where you can make changes in your, within your own competence? And I'm thinking particularly of the Nest and Arbed schemes, which have been described as being too narrow in their focus and delivery in order to help achieve targets, particularly in relation to domestic households, where there is a very real emissions issues.
We have, of course, in terms of housing, looked at meeting the targets with regard to greenhouse gas emissions, but we have tempered those targets, knowing as we do the housing market as it is. I have no doubt that if we had moved forward with the original plans, then the party opposite would have been complaining, and the Secretary of State, that not enough houses are being built. So we've had to forge a compromise given market conditions in that regard. But energy is by far the biggest sector when it comes to carbon emissions, and it is a fact that we do not have in Wales the level of control that exists in England, Scotland or Northern Ireland, a situation that is fundamentally and wholly wrong.
We now move to questions from party leaders, and first this afternoon the Leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Diolch Llywydd. On the 5th of June, the Environment Committee wrote to the Economy and Transport Minister with concerns that the government consultation on the M4 may have breached EU rules. The Minister has said that she'll respond in due course, and the committee have asked for a response by Friday. Will the First Minister tell us now whether or not he believes his government's consultation was sufficient and in line with the EU rules?
There is no reason to suggest otherwise.
I hope that he is confident that his preferred route and the process that he is conducting will withstand any possible legal challenges. There's no doubt that road projects are important, they are permanent, they affect people's livelihood and work. This is true of the roads around Cardiff Bay as well, and his predecessor has made allegations relating to an alleged agreement between the BBC and Welsh Government to relocate BBC to Cardiff Bay. He alleges that a £10 million road was built on that basis. Now, the First Minister appears to deny that any such agreement existed. Why does the First Minister think that his predecessor is making such allegations?
You'll have to ask him that.
First Minister, this whole debacle says an awful lot about your government's approach. A consultation on a £1 billion M4 project is under serious question. There is confusion over the payment for rail electrification. There are allegations of a verbal agreement being the basis for a building for a £10 million road. Will the First Minister now undertake to review how this government conducts itself when making decisions on major transport projects?
Well, I have to say her party was in government when this alleged agreement was meant to have taken place, so they're not exactly entirely free of any association with it. I can say there is no evidence to suggest there was any such agreement in any event.
So
the next point I have to make is I'm sure that her own ministers will tell her, because they were in government at the time, that there was no suggestion of any such agreement, as indeed somebody who was a special advisor in that government, I'm sure, will also advise her as to the situation at that time, who now sits on her front benches. I'm sure he can help in that regard. I can't. I wasn't part of any such discussion, so I, as far as I'm aware, there was no such agreement.
Order. Thank you, Leighton Andrews. Can I ask members to refrain from shouting from their chairs, and when they do, will they think very carefully what they are saying? First Minister, have you finished?
I don't
answering?
accept that anybody was lying. I have to say, a presiding officer, I'm sure her own colleagues will inform her of what was the case when they were in government at the time. I can say, as far as she says things are in some way farcical. What I find farcical is the Environment Committee is looking at the M4 at the moment. The Chair has sent a letter to the Minister, and yet we have a debate tomorrow prejudging the entire issue. Now, that is a farce. It is incredible that there should be... it calls into question the Committee's entire proceedings in that regard, why on earth have committee proceedings when halfway through a party is going to make its own mind up? That makes no sense at all. Far from it being the case that there is an issue with regard to the consultation itself. I'd urge members to let the Environment Committee actually do its job and then let the Minister respond once all the facts have been considered. That will not be the case tomorrow.
We now move to Leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, Estyn today says that Wales's pupils continue to lag behind their English counterparts with regards to English. And yesterday, your Education Minister published a document rewriting the future where he was forced to admit when it comes to the performance of our poorest children, those who are on free school meals, every region in England, the rate of improvement for educational attainment for those children outstrips that in Wales. And for the north east of England, the area of the country that is most similar to us, children who are on free school meals and who are 15 years old are a third more likely to have a decent qualification in England. What assessment has your government made of why other parts of the UK educational system has been able to see improvements for children on free school meals, and why Welsh pupils continue to lag behind?
Well, I mean, first of all, with the Estyn report, it says that the standard of teaching is generally good, that the situation is improving, but there is a lack of consistency. And this is an issue, of course, we have recognised. The Pupil Deprivation Grant will assist and is assisting pupils from poorer backgrounds. The National Literacy and Numeracy Framework will undoubtedly assist in allowing schools and teachers to benchmark the performance of their own pupils. And, of course, Schools Challenge Cymru will assist the 40 schools that need to see improvements in their performance to come up to the level that we would expect. All those things taken together, I believe, will mean that we will continue to see improvements in performance, not just in English, but in other subjects as well.
I'm interested in your comments that those actions will lead to the levels of improvement you expect. Let's look at what you are expecting as published in your document yesterday. Your Education Minister has said that your target for achievement for our most disadvantaged 15-year-olds is lower than that in England. In fact, your target, what you expect to achieve, is less than 2 in 5 15-year-olds on free school meals reaching a level 2 qualification. And you admit that is below what is expected across the border in England. First Minister, do you truly expect and do you truly believe that our poorest students, our poorest children, cannot match or indeed outperform their English counterparts?
I think they can. I think England has problems. The fact that free schools are in chaos, the fact that money has been siphoned away from local authority schools in order to prop up free schools, that will cause greater inequity in the education system, and I do not believe that England will reach their targets. That said, it's important for us to see a continuation of the improvement that we have already seen, and the measures that we have put in place and are continuing to put in place will ensure that that continues.
Well, if you believe they can, why have you signed off the target in this document that clearly states that what you're expecting is below that is achieved by English students? If you expect they can, why have you agreed to this? Can I also ask you, the first action section in your document is relating to family and community engagement. You believe, it's in your document, that this is the key to addressing some of these inequalities. But you say Welsh Government has not clearly articulated the expectations for school in regards to this, nor have we set out how they might achieve those expectations. We need to address this in a policy statement supported by practical guidance. When can Welsh schools and Welsh pupils on free school meals expect to see that policy statement and that guidance? Because it's not in what you published yesterday.
That guidance will be provided as quickly as possible. It's important that where a problem has been identified, it is resolved quickly. But I would, of course, direct the Leader of the Liberal Democrats to schemes such as Communities First and Flying Start that have helped those on lower incomes and communities, indeed, to improve their lot in life, to get qualifications, and taken together with the education system, because you can't take schools in isolation. I believe we do have in place a system that will improve the lives of many individuals and families.
And finally, Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Archie-Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, you have a literacy and numeracy ambition of 65% of students reaching Key Stage 4, Level 2 by 2015. The current A-star to C figure is 52%. Will that ambition be achieved?
That is the aim.
Well, that's slightly different from saying whether the ambition will be achieved or not. And when you read the Estin report today, in particular, that highlights, despite the improving trends in standards of English, the rate of progress is still too slow for 7 and 14-year-olds in Wales to catch up with other areas of the UK. And they also touch on the assessments are also continuing to be one of the weakest areas in our schools. When will Welsh students catch up with other parts of the UK? Will it be 2015, 2016, or when? Just give us a year that we can aim for.
They are already catching up, and the Leader of the Opposition knows that we have a specific target for the next round of PISA results. I have to say, what will not help Welsh pupils, two things. First of all, the recreation of grammar schools, which I know he has advocated.
Oh, a very popular
and
move.
Secondly, well, it depends on what figure. It depends on what figure you believe a 12 to 20% cut in education funding. I don't think either of those things will help Welsh pupils to continue to improve.
I was always told in school, always read the question and give the answer to the question. As usual, I asked you a specific point, First Minister, about what year we might be able to expect the government to hit its target for raising standards within schools. I asked you in my opening question, would you hit your own ambition of 65% of students hitting your own target? Again, you couldn't give a specific answer. Last week, you tweeted ahead of the conference that you spoke at that it was your first conference speech on education since becoming First Minister. Not only have you taken the eye off the ball, you don't even know where the net is to put the ball into. Why on earth can you not be more specific in addressing the challenges in Welsh education and give us the targets to hit? When will standards improve in Wales where we can have parity with other parts of the United Kingdom and eventually overtake other parts of the United Kingdom so our students are at the top of the league table, not, regrettably, at the bottom?
Well, standards are already improving. If you look at apprenticeships, we are way ahead, particularly when it comes to schemes like Jobs for North Wales and indeed the Young Recruits programme, which was something that was agreed between us in government and Plaid Cymru, way ahead of anything that exists under his party in England. PISA results, our target remains, and all our targets remain with regard to education. But I have to say to the Leader of the Opposition, his party's plan to cut education spending by, let's agree, with double figures, will destroy the education system in Wales, as will his plan to reintroduce the 11+. That is not the way forward for the majority of Welsh pupils. It's an exceptionally expensive way to deliver education, lots of new buildings that would have to be built to do that. We will continue to invest in education even as his party looks to siphon money out of education.
We now move back to questions on the paper. Question 3 was grouped with question 2 and 10. Question 4, Lindsay Whittle.
Diolch, Llywydd. What commitment is the Welsh Government giving to supporting hospices in Wales, please?
Well, the Delivering End-of-Life Care Plan reaffirms the vital role of hospices in providing palliative care, and of course they'll continue to receive funding from the Welsh Government and NHS Wales.
Well, thank you, First Minister. We know that the Welsh Government funding of hospices in Wales falls significantly short of funding compared to the United Kingdom and Scottish governments for hospices in England and Scotland. And the service level agreement in Wales is only for 12 months. What direction will you be giving to health boards to increase direct funding in future and to provide a 3-year budget and not just 12 months of funding, please?
Well, from the financial year 2015 to 2016, hospice funding will be transferred to the local health boards, and that decision is supported by the End-of-Life Care Implementation Board and hospices themselves. And that will result, of course, in stronger governance and accountability. As far as ring fencing is concerned, I'm aware that a request was made for funding to be ring fenced, and the Minister indeed has agreed this for 3 years.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Mark Isherwood.
Thank you.
Well, you refer to the funding going to local health boards. In fact, certainly in North Wales, and I believe elsewhere, Hospices are being asked to pay inflation-linked increases to the cost they pay local health boards for services such as occupational therapy, but are not receiving inflation increases in the money they receive from local health boards. In the case of North East Wales, that's equated to a £50,000 annual cut in real terms for Nightingale Hospice, for example. When and how will the Welsh Government be instructing or requiring health boards to talk to hospices about how they can help them do more for less, and how the public pound can generate the best outcomes for the shared patients between the two bodies?
Well, I can say that direct funding to voluntary hospice providers in this financial year is to the tune of £2.848 billion. The real investment is higher, actually, when taking into account the cost of funding medical posts in hospitals, when that is taken into account as consultant contracts are held within health boards. Now, of course, as I already said earlier on, funding will be transferred to the LHBs, and, of course, there is that element of ring fencing that I referred to earlier on.
Question 5, Antoinette Sandbach.
Will the First Minister outline what large infrastructure projects the Welsh Government has in place to showcase North Wales as a go-to destination?
Yes, there are a number of projects that we're taking forward. The Porthmadog Bypass, of course, is one such project. The Bont Newydd Bypass, the Zip World Titan experience at Llechwedd Slate Caverns, the maintenance on the A55, the rollout of Superfast Cymru across the whole of Wales, the station improvements at Rhyl and Llandudno under the Wales National Stations Improvement Programme, the dualling of a major part of the Wrexham to Chester railway line due to start on site this month. Also, of course, the Tourism Infrastructure Fund, which has helped lots of the North, the Coastal Communities Fund, where support was offered, for example, to the Anglesey Sea Salt Company and the Colwyn Bay Water Sports Community Interest Company. EU funding to the National Trust in Aberdaron, and of course further EU funding to the Eryri Centre of Excellence, One Big Adventure. Those are some examples of what investment has brought to the North.
Well, First Minister, I'm very grateful for the list of any project in North Wales that you've ever spent money on, but your government has spent 52 million on Cardiff Airport, 30 million on Pinewood Studios, invested 2 million so far on the Circuit of Wales project, with a potential 30 million to follow in terms of a loan. Controversial, to say the least. The common denominator to all these projects are that they're based in South Wales. You're here to represent the whole of Wales. Can you explain why we are not witnessing a similar level of investment in North Wales, which would shape the area's economy for decades to come?
I have to say that is the most parochial contribution I've ever heard by any member. Is she not aware of Airbus and the amount of support that Airbus has received, and many thousands of people that work in Airbus? Probably, I think, the largest single manufacturing plant in the whole of Wales. I've already given her a list of transport projects, of tourism projects that have been supported. Is she now saying her party's policy is that Pinewood should not come to Wales? Is she saying that? That we should not have provided support to Pinewood because it's in the south of Wales? 2,000 jobs should not have come to Wales, according to the Conservative Party, through their spokesperson. May I remind us, as far as the airport is concerned, Cardiff Airport keeps Anglesey Airport open. If Cardiff Airport wasn't there, Anglesey Airport wouldn't be there either. So it's not simply a question of Cardiff Airport and the jobs that come to Cardiff Airport and the hundreds of jobs that British Airways maintenance base that her party was cavalier about keeping. But these are investments that improve the profile of the whole of Wales. If it is now the Conservative Party's policy that investments should be resisted in some parts of Wales because they're coming to the south, they should declare it now.
Iawn, Llywydd, mae yna nifer o brosiectau cyfalaf mewn buddsoddi mewn is-adeilad yn y gogledd y gallan ni fod yn gwneud ceisiadau amdanyn nhw mewn blynyddoedd i ddod i wella safon y rheilffordd ar gyfer nwyddau ac ati yn y gogledd, croesiad arall ar draws y fennau, buddsoddiad mewn is-adeilad ym Mhorthladd Caergybi. Enghraifft, prosiectau mawr iawn. Fydda'r Prif Weinidog yn cytuno efo fi bod yna beryglon gwirioneddol mewn buddsoddi gormod mewn un prosiect trafnidiaeth, mewn un rhan o Gymru, lle bynnag bo hwnnw, a chlymu pwera benthyg y cynulliad am flynyddoedd i ddod, ac y galla hynny beryglu yn gallu ni i buddsoddi mewn prosiectau trafnidiaeth mewn rhan eraill o Gymru. Son ydw i wrth gwrs am yr M4 yn y D-ddwyrain sy'n angen digwydd, ond mae yna beryg y galla fo glymu arian buddsoddi am flynyddoedd i ddod o fynd am y prosiect drud?
Mae yna ddewisiadau wrth gwrs, ond wrth gwrs un o'r prosiectau mwyaf yn ei chyfalaf yw prosiect Wil Fybr, sydd yn ar Ynys Môn. Nid prosiect Llywodraeth Cymru yw hwnna wrth gwrs, ond rhywbeth wrth gwrs sydd yn mynd i dynnu llawer o swyddi mewn i'r ardal ac yn neud hynny ar hyn o bryd. Wrth gofio hefyd y gwaith sydd wedi cael ei wneud ym Mhorthladd Caergybi. Beth sy'n bwysig yw, a mae'n rhaid fod yn ofalus ynglyn â beth yw'n gweud wrth gwrs ynglyn â'r M4, i fod unrhyw ffordd o ddatrys y broblem sydd ar hyn o bryd yn cael ei wneud mewn ffordd canaliadwy, sef ddim yn cael ei wneud mewn ffordd lle mae rhaid ailystyried mewn 5 mlynedd neu 10 mlynedd. So mae rhaid yn iawn os chi'n mynd i wneud o gwbl. Dwi'n ddim yn meddwl wrth gwrs, felly bydd yna ddim buddsoddiad yn rhannau eraill o Gymru. Porthmadog, Llandysil, ffordd o sgoi Llandysil yn un enghraifft rhwng Ceredigion a Sir Gar, ac wrth gwrs y cynlluniau ynglyn â Bont Newydd. So bydde ddim yn iawn, a nid felly oedd yr aelod yn gweud, bydde ddim yn iawn i weid os ych chi'n buddsoddi yn yr M4, felly bydd yna ddim buddsoddiad mewn unrhyw ran arall o Gymru. Dwi'n ddim yn iawn, ond mae'n cael ei ymddangos wrth gwrs ynglyn â'r buddsoddiad yn ffordd o sgoi Bont Newydd.
Question 6, Janet Finch-Saunders.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on efforts to promote Wales as a host for international sporting events?
Yes, we remain committed to working with UK and international sports federations, as well as our own, to ensure more sporting events are held in Wales. Global events recently attracted include the Rugby League World Cup, the Senior Open Championship, the Rugby World Cup, the Ashes, the World Half Marathon Championships, and of course the Volvo Ocean Race.
Thank you, First Minister. You'll probably be aware, as I am, that currently there is a Football World Cup tournament on. And next year, the Rugby World Cup takes place, of course, with England hosting. While some games will be played here at the Millennium Stadium, does the First Minister agree with me that it's high time that Wales is able to host its own Rugby World Cup tournament? And I just wondered if you do agree, what steps you'll be taking to try and lobby for this?
Well, I think Brazil are hosting the Football World Cup at the moment. We have hosted the Rugby World Cup. We did it in 1999, and the final was held at the Millennium Stadium. And of course, we look forward to the we look forward with some trepidation, I suppose, this very moment in time to the World Cup in 2015 in terms of playing, but in terms of hosting the games at the Millennium Stadium next year. So the Millennium Stadium has been very successful. Hosted, of course, games in 2007. We'll host games again in 2015. And of course, we were the host of the Rugby World Cup in 1999.
Okay. Jenkins?
Dog, pan wnaeth Swydd Efrog gais am y Tour de France, nes I ofyn cwestiwn i chi am Man y Senedd, a wnaethoch chi ddweud bod chi'n edrych mewn i'r ymgais i Cymru cael rhyw fath o ymwneud gyda yr hyn sydd yn digwydd ym myd seiclo. Gyda y tîm cryfa erioed Cymru yn mynd i'r gemer gymanwlad gyda seiclo, gyda o leiaf 10 o'r prif sportif wedi cael ei gwerthu allan, ydych chi'n credu nawr bod yn amser i Lywodraeth Cymru i rhoi seiclo ar flaen y agenda chwaraeon Cymru?
Gwyd cyfran iawn, byddwn ni moyn ail ystyried y sefyllfa ynglyn â'r Tour de France. A hefyd y Giro d'Italia, welys i'r effaith gath hwnna ar Iwerddon, yn enwedig yng Ngogledd Iwerddon, lle oedd yna lot fawr o bobl wedi wario ran o'r gystadlaeth i hunan, hyd yn oed bod y beiciau hunan wedi mynd hibo tŷ fy mam yng Nghyfraith. So felly oedd yn rhywbeth wedi wario ran allweddol yn Belfast a llewed na nawr. Ynglyn â seiclo, wrth gwrs mae'r Tour of Britain ni'n cael blwyddyn hyn, rhywbeth sydd yn dod i Gymru. Ac wrth gwrs ni wedi cael sawl achlysur ynglyn â seiclo yn y gorffennol hefyd. A beth sy'n bwysig i gofio yw bod llawer o'r pethau hyn wedi bod yn y gogledd ar de, neu wedi bod dros Cymru'n gyfan gwbl. Dyn nhw ddim wedi bod dim ond yn y de a dim ond mewn un stadiwm. Wrth gwrs, ni wedi gweld beth sydd wedi digwydd ym Mharc Eirias ym Mae Colwyn, ac wrth gwrs beth sydd wedi digwydd gyda Wales Ride GB, y Tour of Britain a hefyd y Top of World Sailing Championships, pethau sydd i gyd wedi bod yn y gogledd llynedd. Eleni.
Minister, you'll be aware that there are question marks about Qatar's hosting the World Cup in 2022 because of corruption allegations, and also because it now appears to be one of the only one of 9 applicants who are vulnerable for terrorist attacks. Can I ask, if that bid falls through, would you be prepared to talk to the UK government and the other national governments in the UK to try to put forward the UK as a potential fallback host for 2022?
I can honestly say I played no part in those discussions with regard to Qatar. But with regard to the UK, I think the difficulty always has been that England sees itself as big enough to host it on its own. It has the stadiums, and there's been no interest at all from the FA in the past to have a joint bid with other nations. We are too small to host it. Scotland are too small to host it. Even if Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland and the Republic tried to host it, I suspect we still wouldn't have enough stadiums between us. The Republic does, but they're all GAA stadiums, the bigger ones, and there are issues surrounding that. We are happy to work with anybody in terms of hosting the Football World Cup. It will help us to qualify, no doubt about that. Which I'm confident we will do next time around anyway, given the team that we have and given the fact we performed very well against Holland, given Spain's abject performance at the end of last week. But we will work, of course, with any other national sporting organisation elsewhere to jointly host any major sporting event, or I suspect that England would take the view that they're big enough to do it on their own.
Question 7, Mick Anthony.
First Minister, what assessment has the First Minister made on the progress towards pay equality in Wales?
Well, we will include an assessment on progress on pay equality as part of the Welsh Minister's report on the public sector equality duty later this year. We are supporting the Women Adding Value to the Economy project to better understand the causes of gender pay inequality in Wales.
First Minister, you'll be aware that Labour's Equal Pay Act of 2010 introduced mandatory pay monitoring, and this was to basically remove the growing gap between pay between men and women. And of course, the coalition government has now abandoned that completely, despite the fact that it was a Lib Dem promise in their manifesto. Do you agree with me, First Minister, that this abandonment yet again shows that Lib Dem promises are not worth the paper they're written on?
Well, the list of abandoned promises does tend to get longer and longer, but it's important, of course, that we are now 34 years from the first Equal Pay Act, and still we don't have equal pay. And anything that moves away from closing the gender gap in pay is something to be deprecated, and it is a shame that the UK government do not seem to be as committed as they should be to ensuring there is proper equal pay between men and women.
Susie Davis.
Mae meddyliwch gweithredwch a droddwch yn bolisi y Deyrnas Unedig sy'n gofyn I gwmnïau I nodi casglu ag ystyried y data perthnasol a faterion cydraddoldeb o ran rhyw ar draws eu gweithredoedd. Wedyn I gymryd camau I fynd ar afel yn materion hynny a wedyn I adrodd, mater bwysig mwy na monitro, ond I adrodd ar gynnydd ac arfer gorau. Gyda mwy o gyfleoedd gwaith I fenywod yn y sector preifat yng Nghymru, a fyddwch yn annog busnesau yma I ymrwymo i'r polisi hwn?
Mae'n bwysig dros ben, wrth gwrs, bod y sector breifat a'r sector gyhoeddus yn sicrhau bod na gyfleon I fenywod, I sicrhau bod nhw'n gallu codi mewn unrhyw fath o gorff i'r safleoedd hun. Nid felly mae ar hyn o bryd ni'n gwybod ynglyn â'r byd busnes yng Nghymru a'r sector gyhoeddus yng Nghymru taw dynon sydd yn dominyddu'r sector. Does ddim digon o fenywod yn ar rannau uchela o'r sectorau hynny. So felly unrhyw beth sydd yn helpu I sicrhau taw bod yna fwy o gyfartaledd yn y dyfodol, byddwn rhywbeth byddwn ni'n cefnogi wrth gwrs, ond mae rhaid I Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig I wneud mwy mwyn sicrhau bod y fod sy'n ar hyn o bryd ddim yn mynd yn fwy yn y dyfodol.
Alan Fred Jones.
Diolch yn fawr. Na I ofyn cwestiwn chydig yn fwy anodd na un Mick Anthony i'w gobeithio. Mae'r gwasanaeth gofal, fel chi'n dweud, yn llawn o ferched yn gweithio, ac wrth gwrs mae'n sector lle mae yna yn draddodiadol, mae cyflogau yn isel iawn fel arfer, dim ond y cyflog minimum sy'n cael ei dalu, ond hefyd mae o'n faes sy'n llawn o gontractau dim oriau o gwbl. Ydych chi wedi cyfeirio at dyletswydd Llywodraeth yn Llundain. Ydy'r pwerau gan y Llywodraeth yng Nghymru I ddylanwadu ar y sefyllfa anffodus yma, sydd wrth gwrs yn tanseilio gallu merched I ennill cyflog teg?
Peth, ond dim digon. Beth sydd ddim gyda ni, wrth gwrs, sy'n glir i'r pwerau ynglyn â chyflogaeth. Gweithio, wrth gwrs, y flwyddyn nesaf, bydd ni'n gweld Llywodraeth yn San Steffan bydd yn delio gyda enghraifft cytundebau zero oriau mwyn sicrhau bod yna mwy o degwch yn y sector hynny.
Question 8, Sandy Mewis.
What steps is the Welsh Government taking to protect ancient monuments in Wales from being damaged?
Well, there is statutory protection for ancient monuments in Wales and regular inspections are conducted of them. The Heritage Bill, though, through legislative changes and guidance and policy interventions, will improve the protection of the Welsh historic environment, and also to support its sustainable management.
Thank you for that. I was brought up within a stone's throw of Offa's Dyke, quite recently, when you look at the history of the place. But you'll be as horrified as I was to hear of the recent incident in which a section of the dyke was damaged in North East Wales after earthworks were dug out. The police decided they were unable to prosecute because of insufficient evidence of a criminal act. First Minister, it would appear under present laws, a defence of ignorance applies in a case such as this. So can we be sure that the legislation proposed in the Heritage Bill will be enough to stop similar cultural outrages happening again?
Yes, that is something that we are looking at as part of the Heritage Bill. It became clear in the thinking before the Heritage Bill was first produced that there was a need to strengthen legislation. There was a need to make sure that owners, particularly of listed buildings, looked after those buildings rather than let them fall into disrepair. And the Heritage Bill will address how we can remove the defence of ignorance in the future.
Paul Davies.
Diolch Llywydd. Prif Weinidog, byddwch chi'n ymwybodol fy mod i wedi bod yn ymgyrchu i ddiogelu cofebion rhyfel ers amser bellach, a un o fy nodau personol yw i gynnig deddfwriaeth i ddiogelu cofebion rhyfel ar draws Cymru, ac un o fy amcanion yw i Lywodraeth Cymru gynnal rhestr o gofebion rhyfel fel bod gyda ni data penodol sy'n manylu ar y nifer a lleoliadau cofebion rhyfel yma yng Nghymru. A wnewch chi felly ymrwymo i edrych ar y mater o cofebion rhyfel, ac ydych chi'n fodlon ystyried fel Llywodraeth fy nghynnig i greu rhestr manwl mwyn nodi yn gywir lleoliadau a niferoedd cofebion rhyfel ar draws Cymru?
Pwysig dros ben, ni wedi dechrau wneud hwn yn barod. Un o'r pethau gofynes i sawl mis yn ôl oedd, o'n i moyn ystyried cronfa, mwyn sicrhau bod arian ar gael i cofebion dros Cymru. Beth oedd yn amlwg ar y pryd, oedd na rhai oedd wedi cael ei restru, so felly oedd na restr o rheina, ond oedd ddim restr cyfun o bob cofeb yng Nghymru. Nawr, wy'n gwybod bod cymunedau lleol, yn enwedig cynghorau cymunedol, yn dueddu edrych ar ôl y cofebion hyn. Ond mi'n wir i weid ar hyn o bryd bod na ddim restr cyfan fel dylai fe fod, a mae hwn yn rhywbeth ni wedi bod yn ystyried. Mwyn sicrhau, wrth gwrs, bod ni gyd yn gwybod lle maen nhw yn gynta, a pa fath o gyflwr maen nhw mewn mwyn sicrhau bod yna arian ar gael. Ni wedi yn y flwyddyn hyn, i sicrhau bod nhw yn cael i cynnal mewn ffordd bydde y cyhoedd yn erbyn.
Roger Glyn Thomas.
Prif Weinidog, un peth yw cynnal a chadw yr henebion a'r cofebion hyn, ond wrth gwrs, i pwysigrwydd nhw ydy i bod nhw'n adrodd hanes yn treftadaeth ni, yn hanes ni fel cenedl. Be mae Llywodraeth Cymru yn ei wneud i sicrhau fod yr hanes hwnnw'n cael ei gyfleu i genedlaethau ifanc yn yn ysgolion ni, fel bod plant a phobl ifanc yn ymwybodol o dreftadaeth a hanes Cymru?
Fi'n credu bod yn digwydd. Ynglyn â'r enghraifft a chestyll, mae yna lawer o fusodau wedi cael ei roi mewn i gestyll, Canarfon a Chonwy yn ddau ohonyn nhw. Mae cadw yn neud y jobyn da o sicrhau bod bobl yn ymwybodol o hanes Cymru, yn enwedig y ffaith bod gyda ni dros 800 o gestyll. Ac wrth gwrs, yn ystod y flwyddyn hyn, fel wedys i'n gynharach, mae'n bwysig dros ben bod ni'n ystyried y nifer o gofebion sydd gyda ni mwyn sicrhau bod nhw'n mewn cyflwr da, fel bydd y bol yn erbyn.
Question 9, Aled Roberts.
A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog roi'r wybodaeth ddiweddaraf am gynlluniau strategol addysg Gymraeg?
Mae pob awdurdod lleol wedi cyflwyno i cynlluniau strategol Cymraeg mewn addysg i Lywodraeth Cymru i gael i cymeradwyo neu fel arall i wenedogion Cymru i wneud hynny. So felly mae pob un mewn.
Prif Weinidog, fe ddwedwyd wythnos dwytha yn ystod cyfarfod efo rhieni dros addysg Gymraeg bod yna 5 cyngor wedi derbyn ymateb Llywodraeth Cymru i'w cynlluniau nhw, bod ond un yn dderbyniol. Gallwch chi ddeud erbyn pa fis fydd holl gynghorau Cymru efo cynlluniau addysg sydd yn weithredol ar lawr gwlad?
Mae'n dibynnu faint mor effeithiol maen nhw ar hyn o bryd. Os dyn nhw ddim digon effeithiol, felly bydd ddim yn cael i caniatáu. Mae yna rai, wrth gwrs, sydd wedi goffod ail ystyried I cynlluniau nhw. A ni'n gobeithio wedyn ni, wrth gwrs, bydd nhw'n gweld beth yw'r ymarfer da ynglyn â rhai o'r awdurdodau a gweld, wrth gwrs, pob cynllun yn cael I ganiatáu mor gynted sy'n bosib.
Byron Davies.
Presiding Officer, First Minister, when I went to school, safe to say pre-devolution, I was not fortunate enough to receive the level of Welsh available to today's children. In fact, Gowton Boys Grammar School, where I attended, is now a Welsh medium school, a significant improvement in the aim to safeguard the language in the Gower area. My specific question, First Minister, is with a huge step forward in Welsh within our national curriculum and investment in Welsh medium education, why are we seeing a backward movement in the number of Welsh speakers? In fact, the number of people who speak Welsh has fallen in the past 10 years. According to the 2011 census, a 2 percentage point drop from 21% to 19% in the proportion of Welsh speakers. So could you tell me why you think this is happening and what plans do you have to address it?
That is the question. That is the question that we have been trying to address and I will hope to address later on this afternoon as part of the Welsh Language Policy Statement. There are, I think, a number of reasons for that. It's clear that some of that number have left Wales and are not counted in the census this time around. It may well be, for example, that some who have gone to Welsh medium schools then no longer count themselves as Welsh speakers in the future because they no longer practice the language and feel that they no longer have a sufficient level of fluency. We know the census is difficult in the sense it asks the bald question, are you a Welsh speaker or not? And of course there are different gradations of Welsh speakers that, and sometimes people who are in reality fluent don't feel confident enough to put themselves down as fluent. Indeed, I suspect what happens in some parts of Wales is that people who are less fluent in more anglicised parts of Wales put themselves down as Welsh speakers in the way they wouldn't do if they were in areas where they heard Welsh every day and felt that their language wasn't good enough. It's very, very difficult to understand why this happens, but we have to grasp this, and the policy statement this afternoon will, I hope, go some way towards doing that.
Simon Thomas.
Yn edrych ymlaen yn eiddgar at datganiad nes ymlaen gweinidog ac byddwch chi siŵr o fod yn cytuno bod addysg yn greiddiol i'r gwaith y Llywodraeth yn y maes yma beth bynnag. Nawr, mae gyda chi cynllun strategol addysg cyfrwng Cymraeg sydd yn gosod targed o 30 o blant 7 oed yn derbyn addysg Cymraeg erbyn 2020. Ond os craffwch chi ar y cynlluniau strategol fel maen nhw wedi cael eu cyflwyno hyd yma, mae'n amhosib gweld a yw cynlluniau'n ddigonol I cyfaidd y nod yna. Achos dim ond 5 ohonyn nhw sy'n sôn yn benodol, enghraifft, am ysgolion newydd. A byddwch chi felly, pan ych chi'n edrych ar y cynlluniau yma, yn sicrhau bod nhw mynd I helpu chi fel Llywodraeth cyfaidd eich target yn 2020?
Bydd rhaid nhw. Yn nod yw, wrth gwrs, bod pob un o'r cynlluniau hynny yn helpu y Llywodraeth I gyrraedd y target hynny, ac wrth gwrs cyn bod cyn bod pob un o'r cynlluniau hynny cael I caniatáu, byddwn ni'n erbyn nhw I helpu'r Llywodraeth I gyrraedd y target hynny.
Item 2 is y datganiad business.